Hey everybody, welcome to Lessons with Troy. In today's lesson, it's going to be kind of a music theory and fretboard understanding lesson. So let's go ahead and jump on into this one. So I just wanted to show you some simple ways of thinking about the fretboard and how to memorize the notes and how to kind of simplify the fretboard. Let's jump into that first. Okay, so we are in open D tuning, right? And in the key of D, that's what we're really going to focus on. And you might say, well, why do you focus on the key of D? Well, it's open D tuning, so you get these low, kind of more bass notes that as you play scales, as you play intervals, things like that, you can use those lower notes to really help you hear the intervals and hear how all this stuff sounds without a bass player or a band playing. You can really back yourself up, right? So, okay, so let's think about this tuning. Open D tuning, D, A, D, F sharp, A, D. And let's think about it as learning your whole fretboard and learning where the notes are. Okay, so once you learn your D strings, right? First string, fourth string, and sixth string, and you learn where those notes are at, you've got 50% of the neck down. So if you just learn one string, all right, your high D string, the spacing of those notes are the same for your fourth string and your sixth string. You only have 6 strings, so there's 3, so there's 50% of your neck, right? And then, so let's do that first. And the way that I'm going to show you that is to think of the key of D, okay? And kind of where what's called whole steps and half steps are. I'm sure you've heard this a million times, all kinds of lessons out there, but let's think about it in the key of D, open D tuning. Let's think of 2 things. Let's think of the notes F sharp to G. Okay, those are going to be 2 notes right next to each other, and C sharp to D. Okay, now what that happens to be, talking about the intervals of the scale, right? That's the 3rd note of the scale to the 4th note of the scale, and then the 7th note of the scale to the 8th note of the scale, or the octave. Those are the only 2 notes in the key of D that are going to be right next to each other. All your other notes in that key are going to have a fret in between, or what's called a whole step. Okay, so from D, and it just goes up the alphabet, right? A, B, C, D, F, right? Just think of the alphabet, and then when it gets to G, it repeats back to A. So we've got D, E. Now in the key of D, we want to go to an F sharp there. And that's really what we're going to focus on, is the key of D, right? So D, E, F sharp. And notice what I do. Notice how I always have a low string ringing out. That'll really help you with your intonation as you're learning all this stuff. Okay. Now, F sharp to G, that's that half step, right? Now, we're not going to have another half step until now let me explain what a half step is. A half step is just 2 notes right next to each other, no fret in between. So our next half step will be C sharp to D, fret 11 to 12. So F sharp, G, G to A to B, B to C sharp, notice that whole step there, and then C sharp to D. So let me review over that. Remember this, F sharp to G right next to each other, C sharp to D right next to each other. All your other notes within that scale, D to E, whole step, E to F sharp, whole step, G to A, whole step, A to B, whole step, B to C sharp, whole step. So it goes whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. But really, I really want you to think of the notes, and I also want you to think of the interval names, like numbers, right? The interval numbers to this scale. So we got 1 is the root note, D. We've got E is the 2nd of the scale. F sharp is the major 3rd. G is going to be the 4th. I'm not saying the frets now, I'm saying the intervals of the scale. A is the 5th of our scale. There's a little trick to play in tune. If you can hit this harmonic on your 7th fret 4th string, that's an A note. Then you can play that A note there on 7th fret, kind of help you with your intonation. So A to B. B is the 6th of the scale. B to C sharp. C sharp is the major 7th. And D. Now, like I said, once you get that D string, it's the same spacing, fret spacing on your other D strings. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. Same thing on 6th string. Okay, so I have a little trick here for learning your A strings, right? Now, so we have 3 D strings, we have 2 A strings, and we have 1 F sharp string, right? So our 2 A strings is going to be in our 2nd string and our 5th string. Now, the spacing of your A string is going to be exactly like the spacing of your D string, except when you get to the 10th fret, basically, where on the D string you'd go 11 to 12. On the 2nd string, you're going to go 10 to 12. But other than that, the spacing will be the same on your A strings as your D strings. So that makes it way easier, right? So we've got A, there's B. And I'll still use that. Let me use that D as our root there. So A, there's B, whole step to C sharp. C sharp to D. D's the root note, right? Now we've got D to E, E to F sharp. And here's where it changes from what you learned on your D string. F sharp to G is a half step there, right? Fret 9 to 10, right there. F sharp to G. And then G to A. Now that's going to sound like it doesn't resolve, right? Because it doesn't, because we're playing in the key of D and the last note we hit was an A note, the 5th of our scale. So that's okay, but so what I want you to do is when you're picturing, once you learn the D string, right? When you're picturing the A string, think of it being the same fret spacing, except when you go to F sharp to G, that's a half step. So you got to go 9 to 10. But other than that, it's exactly the same as your 1st string. Let's review over the 1st string again. D, E, F sharp, G. Now let's play the 2nd string. Same spacing, right? A, B, C sharp, D. So that makes it easy. Now, whatever you play on the 2nd string, you can play that on your 5th string as far as the spacing goes. A, B, C sharp, D, and so on. Okay, so on your 3rd string then, that's the note F sharp, right? F sharp's the major 3rd of our scale. This one is kind of the weird string, right? It definitely is different than the other two. So you kind of got to learn that. But F sharp to G, remember that's a half step. That's the 3rd of the scale to the 4th of the scale. G to A, whole step. Maybe let's do this. Maybe let me show you where the half steps are first. So F sharp to G. Remember C sharp to D. So 7 to 8 and 0 to 1. That's where your half steps are. Let's go back to the 2nd string and I'll show you where your half steps are. 4th fret to 5th fret, C sharp to D. And then 9th fret to 10th fret, F sharp to G. And then on the 1st string, here's your half steps, F sharp to G. Right, 4th fret to 5th fret, and then there's 11 to 12 there. So let's go back to the 3rd string. Notice how I'm playing that too. I'm playing D, D as my kind of a drone in the background, right? Okay, we'll go up to that note. That's a B note, right? A to B. B to C sharp. Here's our half step. C sharp to D. Keep going, D to E, whole step. And then E to F sharp. Then you can come back down. F sharp, E, that's all the notes in open D tuning as far as the key of D, and really focus on that, and then you can learn all your shapes and patterns kind of from that, and then apply them to other keys. Now keeping in mind your patterns from 0 to 12, when you go up the octave 12 to 24, it's the same shapes as what you just played 0 to 12. Okay, so let's get into intervals now. What's an interval? Well, an interval, the definition, I think it's something like the distance between two notes, right? And we're playing lots of two-note things on the LapSteel, right? Because a lot of times what we're playing is just two notes out of the chord. But I wanted to talk about kind of showing you how I think of just how the intervals react to each other, right? Like, for example, a fourth, right? When you play a fourth, it wants to resolve to the major third. I'll show you what I mean. So if I play G, it's sitting there floating, right? Suspended fourth. That's what they call a suspended fourth, and it wants to resolve back down to F sharp. That's the nearest interval to it, right? See that? So that's kind of what I want to show you with these intervals. And also there's a lot of neat tricks too to learning what your like learning song examples to your intervals. For example, like a minor second is the Jaws theme. Right? Things like that. So I want to kind of go over that too, to just get in your mind of hearing these intervals and thinking about songs that you probably already know, but to put names to the first couple notes of the song that's in your head probably since you were a child, right? So let's talk about these intervals. So D to E.